welcome to Friday night Jazz Vespers at Trinity-Grace. We're pleased that you're able to join us tonight, those of you here in person, and also welcome to those of you who may be joining us online from home. If I haven't met you before, I'm Reverend Sandra Nixon. I'm the coordinating minister here at the church. And I just want to quickly mention a few things we'd like you to know to help you enjoy your time with us tonight if you are here in person. There's a washroom at the back in the corner there. That's a single stall washroom. I ask that you just quickly check any devices you have with you. Make sure that they are on silent for everyone's enjoyment. We are live streaming the service this evening, but it is only this little corner of the sanctuary that is on camera, so you don't need to worry about being on camera, just in case you were worried about that. So, without further ado, we are so delighted to have in the house tonight the Dan Reynolds Trio. They are going to be performing the Prodigal Son Sacred Jazz Suite, and that's, of course, based on the famous parable of the Gospel of Luke. I'm going to let Dan introduce his band and introduce the suite, along with another special guest that we have here this evening, and that is Reverend Dr. Brian Fraser. Welcome. Brian is the minister of Brentwood Presbyterian in Burnaby, Presbyterian Church in Burnaby, and it's his church that commissioned these sacred jazz suites, which we are featuring in our fall Vespers series. And he'll be offering the narrative reflections this evening. So welcome, Brian, and make yourselves comfortable, everyone. Refreshments are at the back. They'll be out there all evening. So I just want to welcome you again to Jazz Vespers. These are troubling times that we live in. And it's, I was saying to this at a service we had at lunchtime today, it feels really important that we find time and ways to come together and connect in the warmth and light of community, in the warmth and light of the Spirit, to sustain ourselves through these turbulent times. So glad you're here. As we begin, we ask the Spirit of life, that loving, sacred energy at the heart of the universe to be with us all in this time together. And I'm going to turn things over to you, Brian.
Well, thank you very much, Sandra. It's a privilege and an honor to be here, especially to be narrating Dan's Prodigal Son Suite for you this evening. I want to say thanks to Sandra and to all of you connected with Trinity-Grace United. Brentwood has had the privilege of working with you over the last 2 or 3 years, helping you connect with the jazz community in ways that are appropriate to this congregation, and we're delighted to be doing these suites. The trio is Dan Reynolds on piano, Steve Smith on bass, and Joe Poole on drums. Sometimes the most familiar stories become the most surprising ones. And we pray tonight that the Spirit of our Creator's Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, will work that magic as we ponder anew the parable of the prodigal son. The plot is kind of common in storytelling. There's desire, there's distress, there's experimentation, there's realization, there's reckoning and reconsideration, there's return and reconciliation, and there's bitterness and wondering. We'll read the story as Luke recorded its first telling by Jesus. It's a translation from Greek into English of a story that was probably told originally in Aramaic. And there's always something lost in the translation. But there's always something new gained by expressions like a jazz suite based on the parable that uncover new insights. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' And so he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. And so he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to my father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' And so he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran out, put his arms around him, and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked, 'What's going on?' He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. The father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you. I've never disobeyed your command, and yet you have never given me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who's devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" Now, that's a familiar contemporary translation from the New Revised Standard Version. But we're going to take the translation process a bit further this evening, moving from words to music, from prose to jazz. Jazz pianist and composer Dan Reynolds. Dan's also the music director at Brentwood. We're privileged to have him doing that with us. But Dan wrote a jazz suite based on this parable. It was actually his graduation project from the jazz program at McGill. And so it's had a wonderful history of iterations. He was originally inspired by Henry Nouwen's study of the story, The Return of the Prodigal Son, the story of homecoming. And on the cover of that book is the Rembrandt painting of the homecoming. So tonight, Dan's joined at the piano, as I mentioned, by Steve Smith on bass and Joe Poole on drums. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you the Dan Reynolds Trio, playing the Prodigal Son Suite. The first movement is called In the Garden. life was good in all of its various dimensions. A veritable kaleidoscope of blessings and bounty surrounding this younger son in this garden of delights. That was his home. But he lost sight of that. In his adolescence, life seemed to become so confined, so restricted. It was being composed by others, made up of chores and responsibilities, things he had to learn and to do because they were right and proper and pure. Conforming is the way of the good life. But he, like us, had this urge to be free, to get out from under those constraints, to go it on our own. Let me be free. Set me up with my share of your wealth as I go. I wonder whether our soulmate here, the one with whom we can identify so easily, is missing something. Is this all too familiar take on life clouded? Are we seeing things through a clouded mirror, dim images that are diffuse and distorted in our enthusiasm to go it on our own? Are we missing the rich bounty of this home, all the intersecting sources of right relationships and abundant life that flourish in the garden? Are we oblivious to the gifts of the Spirit in this place? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness and gentleness, and space for self-composure with all of these gifts. How can these things even be noticed in the brilliance of the lights of the big city, where all the alternative kaleidoscope of possibilities emerges, especially when we've got all of the resources in our pocket to enjoy them? The second movement of the suite is called The Outsider. We're outside the home that we have left behind. We're outside whatever promise of home we might have imagined in the excitement of the city. We're shut out. We're isolated, confused, easy marks, desperate for anyone who seems friendly, who offers us a drink, who welcomes us into their beds. This is the epitome of loneliness. And yet something deep inside of us cries out for compassionate connection. Lots of people and things seem to offer it so easily, so instantly, so convincingly. But they don't deliver on their promise. They may be with us, but they are not for us. We are outsiders to be exploited, objects to be used. And we're thrown away into the alleys in the back, into the pigsties outside the city walls. We wonder in the depths of our souls whether this is the end. Are we destined to be the eternal outsider? Is there any hope? Is this the end of the story? Now, you know deep down in your soul that it is not. The third movement is called The Long Road. there in the midst of the discarded foodstuffs and the dung, something amazing happens. Something truly astonishing, miraculous. The prodigal with whom we can identify so deeply came to himself. Came to himself. How simple and utterly surprising that is. The dignity bestowed by a father's love triumphs over the demeaning and dismissing that came from looking for freedom in all the wrong places. The seed of courage deep within is nourished by our memories of compassion, no matter how earthen its expression may have been. The light of healing has shone through the cracks in the traumas. And this initial sense of self-worth feeds the courage to find a new harmony within all that dissonance that illuminates the first step on the long road home. At times, the steps are quick and confident, sure that this is the path to authentic selfhood. The mistakes are really only opportunities to learn. At other times, they are slow and hesitant, terrified of a father's disappointed anger, so deeply deserved. And so we'll offer to return as a servant, as a slave. That's the best we can offer, the best we can expect. And even that is a foolish and scandalous pipe dream. Will this long journey home ever end? And if it does, how? The fourth movement is called the Love Dance. Joy flooded every cell of the Father's being. Those cells all danced whatever the Galilean version was of a happy dance. The joy was fed by a forgiving and reconciling love that reached depths only music can penetrate. That's what the prodigal came home to. He with us couldn't believe it, couldn't process it, couldn't accept it. But there it was. No questions, no conditions. Welcome home, kid, let's party. I can't tell you how delighted I am that you've come home. Come on, dance a few steps with me. But there's another dimension to the story. The prodigal brother or sister is the next movement. There's a hovering feel of dissonance in the background, lurking and sulking in the shadows. It's fed by revulsion and resentment. How could this father possibly be so welcoming to this reprobate? This reprobate who caused him so much agony and wasted so many of his hard-earned resources, of our hard-earned resources. That anger seethed, not soothed by the father's words of explanation. Does this kind of distress and demeaning always accompany a welcoming homecoming? Will the Father's forgiving and reconciling love heal those angers as well? The sixth movement is called subjectivity. The story that we've just heard in words and in music strikes each of us in a different way, at a different level of our being. Every time we hear it, every time we dance to it. And so that wonderful reflection of Dan and the solo piano following his encounter with an engagement with the story yet again is wonderful. And like so many of Jesus' stories, we're left with so many questions. What did this unconditional welcoming love do to the personality of the returning prodigal? The story leaves that pretty much up to our imaginations. We'd love to know more details on how things turned out after the traumatic events happened that were recounted. But we don't really know. We wonder, did the older son ever accept the father's welcome of the prodigal? Did the father ever regret his joyful welcome as the realities of adjusting to a renewed presence in the family unfolded over the years ahead? Did the returned son ever long for freedom again, for that kind of freedom again, as he adjusted anew to the rich bounties of the home? So many questions, so many provocations, so many wonderings. But let's put the focus back on the forgiving and reconciling love with the seventh and final movement, ongoing beauty. Poole on drums. Steve Smith on bass. And the composer on piano, Dan Reynolds. Well, the memories of the prodigal's pains might well have continued to plague him. Those traumas get rooted deep in our souls. But deeper still is the beauty of the life-giving love of his Father. There is a deep peace in that love, a peace that allows it to be ever faithful, ever forgiving, ever new. With every new day, new possibilities evolve. The energy of God's life as we awaken to a new consciousness of it as a gift. When we become aware of our breathing every morning, that invites us and enables us to bless all of our circles of influence with God's forgiving and reconciling love. No matter what's happening to us, the Father's devotion to our flourishing is happening within us and through us. And so we pray that you have sensed some of that childlike wonder at the forgiving and reconciling wisdom of God's love in our sacred jazz suite this evening. Thank you for participating. You make it what it is on this particular evening. And again, Poole, Steve Smith, Dan Reynolds. And thanks to the folks here at Trinity-Grace United, wonderful colleagues and collaborators and hosts, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sandra now for some closing remarks.
Great. Wonderful evening of music and reflection. Let's just hear it again one more time for Dan. Fraser, and Dr. I'm about to tell you how to turn the mic on and off. My apologies. And also, just a special thank you to you, Deb, for composing this wonderful music that I think brings the story alive for us in a different way and helps us connect to it in a deep way through music. Thank you to all of you for being here this evening, to those of you who may be joining us online this evening. If you're watching online and you wish to support Jazz Vespers, the majority of donations, if you would like to make a donation, do go to our musicians each week or each month. You can either donate at our website or through Canada Helps, and you can choose Jazz Vespers as the place to donate to. Again, thanks for being part of this evening. Hope the Spirit has allowed the words and the music to connect you to something deep within yourself, the light within yourself, and the light that we bring into this room together tonight and hopefully take out with us and share with others. Blessings and peace and safe journeys home.
Oh. No, that was
so well with you.
Just leave it alone. Leave it alone.
Sorry, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Oh, that's good. Our kids at school that it's okay.